For USCFootball.com, I'm Keely Eure, who is Shotgun Spratling for instant analysis of USC's Thursday press conference. Shotgun, welcome back to Instant, and welcome back to your chin, I guess. You look much cleaner now.
Yeah, no beard. We're actually getting close to the season. Feels like we need a fresh start. I've got some hair still flowing in the back, though it's hidden under the hat. But maybe if we actually get to cover games in the stadiums and stuff as we get closer to the actual season and things are looking clear, then maybe that'll come off too. Maybe we'll get a fresh cut as well.
Interesting. Look good, cover good, not necessarily play good, but
look. I always say look good, feel good, fly good. I always wear a suit when I fly, but so maybe it's the same. I always try to have a nice attire along with my hat, with the tie and everything when I'm covering games. So yeah, exactly.
The more you know. I've learned a fun fact about Shotgun today. Anyway, back to Thursday's press conference. We got to talk to head coach Clay Helton today. It's the last time we'll talk to a USC member, either a coach or a player this week, but they'll continue to practice. They'll have a scrimmage on Saturday morning. But we got Clay's summation of the week so far. He said at the beginning of the week, these next 6 days will be the hardest for USC. And we got some clarity on that. He said this has been a hell week for the team. They've been practicing every day in full pads. I believe they even had full uniforms on Tuesday. So it's been different for USC in the sense that it's an increase in physicality, or at least from what we've heard from players and coaches. I know yesterday, Chris and I talked about how OG and Chris Steele were noting how just the energy that defensive coaches are bringing to practice, just how they're hitting more. I guess your takeaway, Shotgun, from just the hell week and how USC is just changing the way they're practicing.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Mock game week always seemed to be the toughest week for USC, and we saw some of the best practices they would have during fall camp in the past under defense coordinator Clancy Pendergast. That's kind of been the case, and that's usually next week. It's the week leading up, the week prior to game week is mock game week. But this year they went a week earlier, and it's interesting that maybe it had something to do with the quarantine. You want to get guys full throttle a little bit earlier. Not real sure. I thought it was interesting that you're going to go full board now and then kind of wean your way off as you're going towards the game. Are we going to see, and that becomes the big question, are we going to see the same thing we've seen in the past, where you get this big rise in physicality and we feel like, okay, we're seeing that they're turning over a new leaf. They're going to, we're seeing these flashes. They're really going hard. They're going to continue that. And this is going to be a different team. And we've seen that with the mock game weeks and getting excited and say, wow, this team looks like they're ready to play. And then after that, suddenly they're just not hitting anymore. They're not, maybe you don't have that same intensity in practices. So we'll see if they continue with that, if the physicality remains, even if the same amount of tackling and stuff is different in the weeks going forward.
Mm-hmm. And I asked Clay Helton, we got another injury update and we'll get to that. But, when the injuries start to pile on, are you still going to want to go as physical in practice? And I asked, what's the balance between that? And his answer was, I'm scared. I'm scared every morning, every night. He said, thank God that they haven't had a major injury yet. But how do you think they're going to balance that, Shotgun? I know Clay said that they're doing 60 to 75 scrimmage plays, and then they'll have 10 to 14, I think it was drives, I believe he said, to just try and make sure that they're not overworking guys. He said you don't want injured guys falling on top of each other because they're tired. But what's the balance you perceive from what Clay Helton said that they're going to have going forward?
Yeah, one of the interesting things is they try to do it in short bursts, and that's what he's talking about with the drives, is to keep guys – they're fully, full capacity going, and you're not just having tired guys. A lot of times that's where some injuries will come from, is just tired guys, trying to do too much or, being overexerted there. They're trying to avoid that, but they still want to go really hard. So giving the guys the adequate breaks in between different periods to try to keep them healthy, but still being really intense in the, the short bursts that they have in the short scrimmage periods and stuff. So it'll be interesting to see. Obviously we can't watch practice right now. So, what they tell us versus what we actually see doesn't always line up in the past. So, but the one thing that I will say is this year is it's not just Clay Helton say that one thing is being really physical. It's everyone. Everyone's talking about it. Elijah Griffin yesterday talking about how, this year, the practices are so much more physical than last year. That really stood out to me. And just listen to some of the players talk about it, because the players don't always sugarcoat things. They might just kind of avoid the subject a little bit more rather than answer it. And Elijah Griffin was pretty straightforward with saying that yesterday that, yeah, 2019 versus 2020, much more physical in practices, and they're tackling much more. So we'll see if it continues. And I think that the coaching staff has really emphasized it as far as trying to be super physical and have that energy, especially with the layoff that they had. And that's one of the reasons that Clay Helton has given for why they've done it this way. I think Todd Orlando and the defensive staff's energy has definitely played a part in it as well.
And just to correct something I said, it was 10 to 14 play drive, so not what I said prior. And Clay Helton also said that they're playing very fast, very aggressive, very violent. So good things you want to hear. And I know we always have to add the caveat. We're not seeing it, so we'll have to see, I guess, when USC starts their home opener, if this is actually translating to games and whatnot. But I mentioned injuries. We did get some injury updates this week. It's interesting. Clay always says that, they only had some minor bumps and bruises, but then when we ask about specific people, then we get injury updates. One of those guys was Gary Bryant Jr. There were inklings throughout the week that he was hurt. Clay Helton clarified that he is dealing with a minor ankle sprain. And then as far as Taylor Katoa, we've noticed him kind of in the background of videos, either not dressed out or doing some rehab work. He is dealing with a hamstring issue. So shotgun, the injuries, the hamstrings continue for the Trojans.
Yeah, I think that there's concern about how many hamstring injuries they have. And that was a question that I wanted to ask Clay Helton, but didn't get a chance is, when do you start going, we need to change some, way we trained, or was there something you weren't doing correctly in the lead up that you ended up with the same injury with now 4, 5, 6 guys? So there's some concern there. The good thing is it doesn't sound like any of those hamstring injuries, at least from what we've been given, what we've been told, are significant enough that players are going to miss time. Clay Helton has said that, when he says minor bumps and bruises, he means they'll be out in fall camp, but they should be back by game time. He said that there's been no season-ending injuries, though there were some before camp began. Obviously, Solomon Tulialapupu and Jordan Asefa, those stand out significant injuries in the linebacker group, which we'll talk about a little bit. But you got to be concerned with the number of small things that are continuing to pile up. And this is what we see every fall camp when, there's times when there's 20-something players that we've seen in the past not being dressed out. If you're changing the mentality, does that include getting more guys to practice through some bumps and bruises versus being out for a certain amount versus, it's that balance. And that's what you asked Clay Helton about, is balancing, the physicality versus injury. And it's the same thing with coaches trying to push guys and say, hey, you can play through that versus, okay, we need to rest up now going into the season so that we'll be ready to go then.
Yeah. Another weird instance of not really getting a full update was when someone asked about Trevor Trout, the defensive lineman who we haven't really seen in pictures or videos. Maybe he isn't getting some playing time that we thought. And so someone asked about it, and Clay Helton revealed that he's having a back issue, and Helton even questioned the future of his football career based on that medical issue. I mean, what do you take away from that, Shotgun? That seems like something that would just kind of flew under the radar.
How do we just suddenly, oh yeah, no, he's out and maybe done for his career here? Like, how is that not part of your injury updates at the beginning of camp or something? I mean, I know he's not the starter on the depth chart, but we expected he'd be a guy in that mix, especially after Jay Tufele, opted out this season, that he and Dejon Benton and a couple of those older JUCO guys would be in the mix at the defensive tackle, defensive end spots, and would need to fill in. This is another blow to the defensive line. Now they've got some young guys that have stepped up, and Clay was complimentary of Jamar Sakona, the freshman, and Hunter Echols and Abdul Malik McClain coming off the edge. But you need the big bodies in the middle. And Trevor Trout was one of the bigger bodies on the defensive line, and a guy that you were looking to see, was this the year that he takes that jump and moves into the rotation at least. He had been passed up by Dejon Benton last year. He had the bicep injury a couple years ago. But apparently this back injury is serious enough that, that it's potentially a medical redshirt possibility there for him. So you're concerned when that's the case. And it's also concerning that this is something that gets thrown out, 11 practices in, and only when someone brings it up. And it's not something that was noted earlier. It just seems like that would be something you would point out, that, hey, we have a player that's out for the season and we're concerned about his future health, that we can play the game of football.
Yeah, I mean, I understand USC's mindset of maybe just protecting the player because all eyes now turn to Trevor Trout when he's already going through something. But at the same time, it's hard to get, okay, there's minor bumps and bruises and then find that out. It's a weird dichotomy in that sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think you start to question credibility when
Mm-hmm.
you don't hear about season-ending injuries when you tell us that there's only minor bumps and bruises. Now, granted, he said that there's only minor bumps and bruises have occurred during camp. This was obviously an injury that occurred before camp, so there is a little bit of leeway there. But definitely concerning for Trevor Trout that his football career, there's question marks about it. And another out-of-state player that USC brought in, highly rated, that has not panned out for them. They've had a couple of players that's happened to over the years, with the EJ Prices and Jamel Cooks and Pi Youngs, and a lot of guys from out of the state, coming across the country that haven't been able to live up to their recruiting rankings.
Mm-hmm. And obviously, we're wishing Trevor Trout the best going forward. Hopefully, that will get resolved. Now, we've heard a lot of love from Clay Helton about Pili Naotote and how he's taking to Todd Orlando's tough coaching. Well, we got more of that EA love, if you will, on Thursday. He talked about him at length more again and said that EA's really just progressed in his ability to get off blocks. That's something that's an area where he struggled in 2019. And he just said that EA is playing with an unbelievable effort. He's not taking any plays off. And Shotgun, you actually noted this before we even started filming. Clay hasn't really gone into depth about individual players too much, but EA seems to be that guy that he keeps circling back to. I'm wondering how that translates to his on-the-field play, because it must be pretty significant if Clay is talking about him this much.
Yeah, I mean, obviously Clay will go a little bit more in depth when he's asked about individual players, but he's been, he's given tidbits on a lot of players. When he talks about the offensive line, he usually talks about 8 different guys. He doesn't talk about this guy's doing really well and it goes on for 3 or 4 sentences and then touches on the other guys. No, he just gives one little tidbit and then keeps moving down the line. EA is a guy that's been different with. He's been very complimentary. I think that he's really seen growth there, and he's really credited to Todd Orlando, the defense coordinator, and how much he's been pushing Pili and Naotote, and the combination there. I think that he's just getting another level of EA's talent out of him. He's pushing it. He's pushing the right buttons, and this happens a lot of times. A player transfers or a player goes to another level or a new coach comes in, and sometimes the coach and a player just click. Sometimes you need to be pushed in one way versus the other. Some guys need to be yelled and screamed at. Other guys need to be coddled a little bit to get the most out of them. And the best coaches find out what's the best way to coach up each individual player. And it sounds like Todd Orlando has been able to kind of unlock the potential of Pili and Naotote, which is a really exciting development for USC fans, should be, because he's shown so much capability, so much talent, just hasn't put the consistency there, and hasn't done it on a regular basis, and there's been kind of question marks. When's it going to happen? When's it going to come out? Because he was the top-rated defensive player in the country coming out of high school. Basically, those guys usually come on campus and are making instant impact plays. EA, not so much. That hasn't been the case. But it sounds like maybe that's what we're going to see this season. And one of the things that Helton said is that Orlando's on him every day. He's about his conditioning. He's on him about his weight. So, I expect to see EA playing a little bit lighter weight and moving a little bit better rather than having as big of thumps necessarily. Maybe he's, to be able to get to a couple more plays than he was in the past. So I'm looking for a big season out of Pili and Naotote from what we've heard so far.
Mm-hmm. And one of the things we're going to be looking for on November 7th is who's playing alongside EA. Right now, it's Raylan Goforth, just because Kanai Malga is still out with a hamstring injury. Clay Helton did say that he is going to be able to do some more individual work, so he's working his way back. But Raylan Goforth is the type of guy who, sometimes when injuries fall the way they do, a certain guy who maybe was not getting run with the first team and a lot of reps in the limelight is now thrust in this position. And sometimes we see guys either rise to the occasion or kind of fall back or look overwhelmed. And I think that's something we would definitely be looking for at practice. Okay, how is Raylan Goforth handling this situation? And Clay Helton was kind of asked about Goforth and what it will look like as far as the 2 deep goes. And Helton was like, that's still a decision that needs to be made. He didn't want to commit like, yes, Raylan Goforth is our day one starter. So it seems like Helton still values the experience that Kanai Malga brings to the table. What are you looking for in that battle between those two?
I think that you're looking for the experience that Kanai Malga has, but you need to see who fits best in the scheme, and that's going to be the thing that I think gives Raylan Goforth an extra step forward in this competition. Is that it's not the same scheme. He's not trying to impress the same defense coordinator or linebackers coach. It's all brand new, so you come in with a fresh start, so he's got a better chance, especially now that he's practicing and Kanai's not. Now, Clay did say that Kanai Malgo was really flourishing before the hamstring injury. So we'll see when he comes back, how he jumps in there. And, if we're able to see practice later in camp, maybe we'll see the split of reps there if both of them are healthy. I think that's what you're really looking for. But Raylan Goforth is a guy that last year was making plays when he got the same type of opportunity in camp. Now, I think with what we've heard from Tyler Orlando is he plans to rotate guys a little bit more than Clancy Pendergast was. So maybe even if Kanai gets the start, maybe we see Raylan Goforth in game situation. He gets an opportunity there, and he has a chance to impress the coaches that way as well.
Mm-hmm. Now, one of the phases of the game that we haven't gotten too much information about is special teams and new special teams coordinator Sean Snyder. Clay Helton was asked specifically about him. What did Clay have to say about him and the players he's developing?
He said he was asked what he's learned so far in camp, kind of halfway through, and he said he was extremely appreciative of Todd Orlando and Sean Snyder for what they've done right by the players of trying to keep it simple for them. So it's the KISS method, keep it simple, stupid, and let your players go make plays, especially when you have more talent on your roster than the other team, which is what USC does against any team in the Pac-12. Maybe Oregon can compete and be close, but as far as complete talent, a depth of talent, then, USC has more talent. So you just got to keep it simple, let the players go make plays. And I think that's what he's hitting at with them. He did say that he was really excited by the leaps that the specialists have made. He said those guys have benefited the most from Sean Snyder. He said the kickers, talking about the kickers and punters, they are killing the ball right now, he said. Now, obviously, we got a lot of heat for saying that Ben Griffiths had a huge leg last year, and then it didn't see the same results on game day as we would have thought that we would have seen. But he said today, Clay Helton called Ben Griffiths an extreme talent. Don't exactly know what you mean when you say extreme talent, but that's a high compliment there. And he said that Sean Snyder's taken him to a different level. That seems to be a common phrase that we've heard a lot with the new coaches, is taking them to a different level with some individual players. And he also was very complimentary of Parker Lewis, the freshman kicker, All-American kicker coming in from Arizona. Said he's propelled him into a competitive situation. So it sounds like he's in the mix for that kicker spot as well, or maybe the kickoff duties. We'll see where that kind of shakes out eventually. But, potentially exciting things for the special teams, when usually special teams aren't the things you say, oh, that could be exciting from a fall camp.
True. I've learned my lesson. I'm not going to hype up Ben Griffiths anymore, but we did see great punts in practice. That's all I'm going to say.
He does have a booming leg.
He does.
We'll see if they fully deploy it. That was the question last year, is why are you not just letting him kick the crap out of the ball?
Deploy the leg. So any final thoughts, Shotgun? I know I haven't talked to you all week on Instant, but you have been listening to the press conferences. Anything notable that you want to add before we wrap up the week?
I think that, talking about players that have taken it to the next level and playing the best ball since they've been here. Clay said that about Halili and Naitiote today. Also something he said about Stephen Carr earlier in the week. That stood out to me. I think that seeing Stephen Carr and him getting a lot of praise, and also Mike Jinks saying similar things on Tuesday, that could be a really big development for USC if he can get back to where he was as a freshman. Those first couple of games, we saw the glimpses of what he could be as a special player. You look at a player like Najee Harris, same recruiting class. A lot of talk about who was the number 1 versus number 2 back between those two guys. Both of them were 5 stars. Look at how Steve Sarkisian has utilized Najee Harris out of the backfield. He is one of their, they have such great receiving weapons, but also Najee Harris being used as a receiving weapon makes that offense so dynamic. So we'll see if USC does something similar with Stephen Carr. Really looking forward to the potential of that, because they talked about some 2-back sets. So that's one of the things I'm looking forward to seeing and kind of optimistic about for the USC offense. So that stood out. And then just OG talking about, the physicality and how different it is this year. When he said it, it stood out a little bit more than hearing the coaches say it. So those 2 things stood out. And I guess Dante Williams saying that he wants OG to be a showman. That was kind of cool. It's saying that he wants him to be that gladiator and know that the spotlight's on him at all times. If you want to be a showman, then go make plays and be a playmaker. So that was kind of interesting as well. Those are the things that stood out to me this week so far.
Yeah, same for me too. So we're on the same page there. That's going to wrap it up for USC's Thursday media availability and week 2 of training camp, even though they have a couple more practices. But that'll wrap it up for us. For Shotgun Spratling, I'm Keely Eure. For more, check out uscfootball.com.